Today I have a great guest, Mike Corey from the Human Service Chamber. Sorry, I've seen so many human words today, but thanks for joining us. So what we're going to learn about today, they are an organization here in Columbus that really helps facilitate things for other nonprofits and such. And of course I'm going to we'll get more into those details and a good explanation of it. But let's start by doing just that. Let's just tell us exactly, what you all do.
Sure. First, thank you so much for having us on the show.
Sure.
I'm really excited to be here and talk about the work we're trying to do. We're functionally a chamber of commerce for nonprofit organizations in Franklin County serving vulnerable populations. That's our general purpose.
Okay.
We've been around since 2010, and our goal is to provide one unified voice on behalf of the sector. And the sector is very diverse, which is part of the fun and part of the challenge.
Mm-hmm.
There are agencies in housing and healthcare and homelessness and food access and reentry services and refugee immigration services and child care and education.
Mm-hmm.
It's a really wide breadth, and I love that about it. It's one of the
Right.
reasons why I like the job as much as I do. And our job is to fight for them. And I try to treat this like a client relationship where I have to provide services to them wherever I can within the confines of our mission.
Right. Well, I'm sure some of those are overlapping, right? And that's why they come together as a chamber. So,
Absolutely.
and did you say in terms of is it geographical or demographics? I mean, how do you define the area or
Right.
who you're helping?
Right now it's geographic.
Okay.
If it's a C3 organization providing direct service work in Franklin County, then they can be a member of the Human Service Chamber.
Okay, good. And how many members do you have now?
We're about 72 right now.
Okay, all right. And that's grown over the since 2010, right?
Yeah, so when it started, I'm not sure what it was out of the gate. At its peak, the chamber was around 70 members.
Okay.
The membership shrunk for a while down to about 48 when I started in the job in 2017. We're back up to about 72.
Okay. How many, as we define human services, basically organizations helping people with problems, right? And we could talk about the problems. But how many are there in Franklin County? Do you think?
So it's hard to answer that question with great precision, and I apologize for that.
That's okay.
There are over 8,000 nonprofit organizations in Franklin County alone, but that includes things like private schools and charter schools and religious institutions and hospitals. So it's hard to say precisely how many are doing the direct service human services work. There are certainly more than 72.
Right.
There are certainly less than 8,000.
Right,
That's about as precise as I can be.
Somewhere in there.
Yeah.
So, well, I'll tell you, when you don't realize this, Columbus is a really fast-growing city.
Absolutely.
And, it's always going to have its pains because of that. Any city is. And so, knowing how many services we have for people is encouraging. It's upsetting that people need these services, but it's great that we have the resources. But when people are in need, they're the ones that have the hardest time finding the right need, services. So that's why I think, it's so important, right, to bring
Sure.
this together and to kind of advertise, what people do. So
Absolutely. That's one of the biggest challenges in this field is how do we make sure the people that need the services know where to go, and then how do we get them there? What are the accessibility challenges, whether they're transportation, whether they're awareness, whether they're cost, whether it's a child care issue. There's a lot of things that can make that harder, but at the baseline, how do we make sure people know what's out there and what they can take advantage of?
right. So let me take a step back too. You're from Columbus.
I am.
So this seems like a pretty rewarding experience. Any of those are rewarding. I mean, a lot of your members are on the website. The career opportunities show a list
Yes.
of many of those companies, right? Groups, not all of them. So, but tell me about yourself. How did you become involved with this then?
Right, so I'm a recovering lawyer.
Okay.
I was in private practice at a law firm called Bricker Neckler, and I was practicing healthcare law there,
Okay.
which basically meant I was a corporate attorney for healthcare systems.
Right.
And as much as I loved the firm and the atmosphere and my colleagues, corporate law was not my passion. I had gone into law school wanting to get in the education and policy space, and I wanted to do two things in particular. I wanted to undo the way we fund public schools, redo it, do it better, and I wanted to tackle the resegregation of public schools. So I went to law school to do that, and Bricker Neckler was the only firm with a robust education law practice in the entire community at the time. There are others now that would say they have that as well, and that's great. So I went to Bricker, and I was particularly particularly drawn to Bricker because in the early 2000s they had successfully challenged the way we fund public schools in Ohio. So I got there and they said, it's great that you care about education. We're delighted to have you here, but we need you in healthcare instead. And I said, okay, that's what I'll do. And I had great mentors and great colleagues in that space, but that's not where my heart was every day with what I was doing. So in 2015, I found a job at the Children's Defense Fund of Ohio, which is a national nonprofit based in D.C. that has satellite offices in 6 or 7 states across the country, including Ohio. And that was a dream job. It was mostly healthcare, funnily enough, but a very different kind of healthcare. Medicaid. How do we make sure Medicaid is available for children and families? How do we ensure food access for early childhood educational challenges there? How do we make sure lead isn't in the paint and the water that our kids are drinking or being exposed to? Things of that nature. And I loved it. But I felt a compulsion to also work on the presidential campaign in 2016. And our organization, the Defense Fund, is very importantly and rightfully nonpartisan. So I couldn't do both.
Right.
So I left the Defense Fund after 8 months and worked on one of the presidential campaigns doing voter protection work, nonpartisan work, which I loved. And I knew when that ended, no matter what, I'd be unemployed.
Right.
So on November 9th, my job search began. I really started it in December. And I looked for something where I could serve vulnerable populations with whatever skills I could offer. And so the educational piece of that has remained very important to me. But I knew that my perspective had broadened, and I wanted to do a little bit more than just focus on that. And when I saw the posting for the Human Service Chamber, A, I thought, I have no idea what that is, but it looks interesting. And B, I thought it was perfect on paper as to what I thought I could bring to the table. And frankly, it's been the best job in the world. I feel satisfied and grateful every day that I get to do this work. I would do it for free. Don't tell my board that. But I absolutely love the work.
Okay. So as, you know, on a daily basis and over the months of the, you know, coming years, as we really grow as a town, what are the issues that are most forefront right now that you're trying to help these, you know, part of the members of the chamber?
Right. So it's a great question, and my job every day is to help the helpers. That's the reason why I love my job so much. And a challenge for me is sometimes I want to jump in and be hands-on, roll my sleeves up, and help them more directly, but I have to step back and I have to think about what is the system impact that we're trying to have? How do we make this stronger and better? How are we helping our members and how are we helping the community at the same time? That has to be the long-term thought. There are emergent needs that we have to deal with yesterday, but we also have to be planning for 50, 100 years down the road. And my goal is to be supporting on those fronts. So the immediate issues that we see, housing is obviously the hot one right now, that people are really coalescing around. This is a big issue. And so many other challenges revolve around that. Even our leaders in the food access space, which I think for a long time was considered to be that in healthcare generally, considered to be the predominant #1 issue. It's housing. It's Maslow's theory of needs. So housing is huge, and the surge in cost of living in our community. I would say food access continues to be a significant challenge. As great as the system has become, and as much data is out there and is available, and how effective the food bank and so many of its partners are, that's still a big challenge.
Right.
I think certainly we have an addiction crisis in this community that has not gone away. We have a lot of agencies working in that space from various capacities. There are workforce issues here that make this work that much harder. There are accessibility issues in terms of transportation and cost alone that are a big challenge. And in CODA and Smart Columbus, I think we have 2 organizations eager to work with the nonprofit community to fix these issues.
Right.
I think we have a lot of immigrant and refugee populations here that have unique needs, and there are cultural competency challenges across sectors, where if we can do that more effectively, we can help those populations more uniquely. Segregation is a significant issue in our community. How do we help to break down a lot of those generational segregation issues that exist in our community? And how do we tackle generational poverty? A lot, and all of this is intertwined in one way or another.
Right.
So there's a lot there, and I'm leaving many things out. There are childcare issues, there are educational challenges, there are after-school challenges.
Right.
So how do we take a step back and approach this holistically, while still having some priorities about how we go about doing this work?
Right. Well, and you know, we talked about when we work with and talk with different nonprofits, there's usually a sister organization in other cities and such. But as we talked about, you really don't have that to fall back on, right? I mean, so you said there might be a couple
Right.
across the country. So everything you're doing is kind of trying to figure it out, the best way to do all these things.
Yeah, so the good thing is that we have a community where a lot of this work has been happening in a de facto way. And we have great partners in the Columbus Foundation and the United Way and some other foundations. And the city and the county in particular have been great partners in a lot of ways as well. So our ability is to come in and have focus, and this is all that I have to think about. And I love that. I love that. And we have nonprofit leaders that have been doing this for decades as well. But now there's one organization where we can focus on that. But you're right, there isn't a model to follow. There is an analogous organization in Cincinnati called the Human Services Chamber of Hamilton County.
Okay.
I actually talked with them yesterday.
Okay.
Great partners. We're going to do some stuff together in the year ahead. And I learned yesterday that there's an organization in Austin, Texas called One Voice Austin that is a couple of decades old and has about 125 members. And I'm eager to talk to them and learn more about how we can learn from them.
Right.
And there are certainly statewide associations. Excuse me, in Ohio it's called OANO, the Ohio Association of Nonprofit Organizations. They do certain work. We try not to do anything that is duplicative in terms of services. But yeah, we're figuring this out and building it out to be valuable and unique
Right.
as we go along.
Okay. So one that comes to mind, we had somebody who was talking about helping the community through technology, right? Because the problems you're talking about have been around decades, if not centuries, right? And especially in a growing town. I mean,
Right.
we should be able to learn for others. But the problems are hard. I mean, you talk about land. We probably have good areas now where low-income people can live, but other people want to come and develop that. And so you're always going to have those conflicts and all. So,
Yeah.
so we had somebody who was part of Give Back Hack.
Yeah.
So
Was it
last
Derek?
week, it was Derek,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and so that I find, so tell me, I mean, how, are you working with them, because you talk about transportation, right? I'm hoping more and more, you know, in Uber and self-driving cars will be able to help solve some of that problem.
Sure.
And that makes it harder for CODA and us to develop subway systems that we're just probably not going to, right?
Right.
So, so talk about technology, I guess.
Yeah,
And how-
so technology has so much potential to streamline and make more efficient a lot of the work in the sector. And part of our job is to figure out how we can incorporate it in a way that allows for increased inclusivity as opposed to more exclusivity. So with Smart Columbus and CODA in particular, I think we have such a tremendous opportunity to do something unique that no one in the world has done before, which is to build out a really unique, comprehensive transportation system for the 21st century. And I know that some people get annoyed with me because I get so excited about this, but to me this is such a unique opportunity for our community. And I get particularly excited because the leadership at CODA and Smart Columbus is totally on board with how do we figure this out. This can't just be a system that benefits a fraction. This has to be something that benefits everybody. And we haven't figured it out yet, but we have great allies in those organizations. So we had a meeting with CODA and Smart Columbus and about 35 of our member CEOs last summer. And the conversation was great so that we could talk about here's some of the opportunities that we see, here's what works, and here's some of the challenges. And the primary challenge that emerges, and everybody knows this from their side of this as well, is if I live in one community and I don't have a car, and my job is on the south side of town at a distribution facility, there's not an efficient way for me to get there. It probably requires 2 buses, and it's going to take me more than an hour in total commute time. And maybe I have to carry my lunch with me, maybe I've got to carry my bag for work rather. There are unique challenges there, as opposed to living on a bus line when it's a direct shot.
Right.
And it's different. So what can a community do that is not going to have the infrastructure that a New York or a Philadelphia or a DC or an Atlanta has? We're going to be more like the rest of the country and the rest of the world because we don't have that infrastructure in place already. So building out something like that from scratch is going to happen. The powers that be have said we're not going to do that. Okay. The technology, even if we embraced it today, might be antiquated by the time it was done. So we're in this interesting purgatory between driverless cars being pervasive and widely adopted and whatever we've
Mass
got now.
transportation,
Yeah.
which we're lacking.
Yeah. So how do we figure something out that's going to alleviate problems for employers, for the city, for the county, and for the people that need to get from A to B to C to D? And if we can figure this out in an effective way, then we improve all sorts of work happening in the human services space. Because if I need to go to my doctor because I'm 2 months pregnant, and I can't miss that check-in, but then after that I need to go to the Social Security office, or I need to go to the BMV, or I need to go to the hospital to check on my ailing mother, that's all transportation time. That is a challenge. Oh, and by the way, I have to get to my 2 jobs.
Right. And you might have a kid at home.
Right.
Right. I mean,
And as an extreme example, of course. But one of the things that we did last year was survey our membership to get a sense of how much money they were spending transporting their clients. And it was over $3 million. And at the time, it was about 30 agencies that gave us their figures. Now I would guess that it's about $4.5 million with our membership having evolved a little bit. So our agencies are spending a lot of money moving people around. And the more effectively we do that, the better their rates of getting what they need and getting on their feet, not needing those services anymore get. So
well, each of those agencies are doing it in a silo, right? I mean, they're not, maybe some are coordinated, but for the most part, it's just doing it themselves. So I'm sure there's a lot of overlap and things that can be more useful.
There's a huge opportunity here.
Yeah, so, well, that's awesome, because as we see that, I think technology is what's going to, really help us go a long way.
Absolutely.
So I know you've got a new website coming, and so I'll talk about that a little bit. I think the important thing is, if you're telling me in May it'll be coming, but it's still worth going to humanservicechamber.org, signing up for the newsletter, getting on Twitter, and doing things like that. So
that'd be fantastic.
But also the career opportunities are still relevant, right?
Yes.
So, and so you can do that.
Yeah.
You can add something?
Yeah. So one of the parts of my job that I didn't anticipate was that we'd get to do a little HR work. And I'm delighted every week when one of our CEOs reaches out and says, Michael, we're looking for a new director of development, or a new HR director, or a new IT person, or what have you. And I get to reach out into my primary, now secondary and tertiary networks and say, okay, who wants to work in this sector? And conversely, folks from that network of mine are coming to me saying, we want to work at a nonprofit, send us jobs.
Right.
So one of the things we're trying to do is essentially have a newsletter just for jobs, where I can distribute that once every 2 weeks or once a month or something like that, because that's a value add for our members. There's a workforce challenge for them just as there is for the corporate world.
Right.
And if we can help facilitate some of that, I'm excited about it.
I look back to any time I looked for the handful of times in my career that I've looked for a job. Yeah, I don't see anything for nonprofit, So, and there's a lot of people that would really love that opportunity
Precisely.
to be able to do it. So that would be useful.
Precisely.
So. Well, listen, we could talk about this all day. So I appreciate you coming in. Please check them out. If you are a nonprofit, that's in the human services world, look to help as well, and reach out to them and see how they can help you. So, but otherwise, it's been great speaking with you. I mean, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
And everybody have a nice week. I'm off to San Francisco today, so I won't be here as the weather warms up a little bit. But Phil will be back next Friday to talk to you all. So thanks, and have a great week. I hope I didn't end that one too fast. So when you said you were on the Hillary campaign, that was not